Hey up! Right, this isn't the video that I intended putting out today. Obviously, people were expecting one of the reviews for the bear, which I will get on with as soon as I can. Let me just explain first. We've recently had a bereavement in the family, which has turned the household upside down. And then on top of that, another problem's cropped up regarding one of my bikes over the last 2 weeks, which is causing some worry and an awful lot of wasted time, if I'm honest. We live in the age of communications. Most of us have mobile phones with internet capability. We have computers, laptops, that kind of thing. And we have, I'm not really sure what they're called, sort of data collection companies that get our emails and our phone numbers and they sell them to people, and everybody gets hold of your contact details. And one of the features of modern life is that you're constantly being bombarded with spam and phishing, that's phishing with a PH, communications. Now, a lot of the spam is just annoying. It's basically people trying to sell you products or services of one type and another. It's incessant. I must get probably 4 phone calls a day, which, you know, luckily for most of the time, it actually presents it on my phone as a spam telephone number, so I can just sort of cancel it and get rid of it. But even then, you know, recently I've cancelled the call, immediately they've rung again, so I've cancelled it again, and immediately they've rung again. And there can, of course, be a more sinister angle to some of these communications. I mean, over the years I've had texts telling me that my bank account's been compromised and someone's drawn out £800 and that I need to ring a particular number to get it sorted out. I've had calls purporting to be from Amazon telling me that someone's made purchases on my account, and, you know, they always seem to come from Indian call centres. And this is before you even start to consider things like emails. I must get 20 emails a day telling me my McAfee antivirus has expired and I need to pay to have it sort of brought back up to date again. I get emails telling me that the payment's been declined for my cloud storage, so I need to pay up and get it back up to date, otherwise I'll lose its benefits, even though I don't have any cloud storage. And then there's the old chestnut, of course, of the texts and emails telling you that there's a parcel for you that can't be delivered because there's a charge that needs to be paid on it. That's been going around for years. I think I get about 3 a day. You see, the problem is my telephone number now, my mobile number, I've had it for about 30 years, so everybody and the dog's got it. And the email address that I generally use, again, I've had that about 20 years. So, again, everybody and the dog's got it, and they've sold it on to everybody else. But changing them for new numbers or a new email address would be just too disruptive to my life, so I have to put up with it. Now, emails, etc. are fairly easy to sort out. My spam folder catches most of them. Those that, you know, aren't caught by the spam folder, a quick read and you can usually establish that it's a load of rubbish and just get rid of it. Texts sometimes take a little bit of deciphering. Phone calls, of course, I have a rule now. I don't accept a phone call from any number that I don't know or that isn't in my phone book on my phone. And so that's where my problem started about 3 weeks ago. Now, I'm not joined at the hip to my phone. I quite often will put it somewhere like in the kitchen in a morning, and I probably won't come back to it all day. You know, I'm not one of those people that lives and breathes with the phone in the hand. And I noticed about 3 weeks ago, over 2 or 3 days, that I kept receiving phone calls from a particular number that I didn't recognise. They seemed quite persistent, so on one occasion I did ring the number to see who it was, and it came up with the name of an insurance company that they've rung me, but it wasn't one of those numbers where you can get through to speak to anybody. It was just a warning that they would ring you back. Now, I didn't recognise this particular insurance company, and I formed the opinion that they were probably cold calling to try and sell me house insurance or something like that. So I continued to ignore the number for several days, and then early last week I got a letter through the door from this same insurance company telling me that I'd been involved in an accident back in March on the MULE, my classic 500. I'd failed to report the accident to them, and if I didn't get in touch within 5 days, they were going to pay out to the claimant that had got in touch with them, which would affect my no claims and may jeopardise my ability to get insurance in the future, which obviously upset me a little bit. Now, I knew that I hadn't been involved in this accident, and I knew that the mule hadn't been involved in an accident because I'd only actually seen it 2 or 3 days before. I don't ride it much nowadays. I think it's a year since I last rode it, because the MOT had expired almost a year ago, and I just didn't see any point in getting it MOT'd again because I wasn't riding it. You know, I've got lots of bikes that I ride, and that one's sort of been relegated to the most inaccessible corner of my garage out of the way. Now, obviously, I won't give names and specifics for obvious reasons, but I rang the number up on the letter, still not 100% convinced that it wasn't a scam. And while I was waiting for them to pick up and for it to go through the various choices you have to make to get through to the right person, I did a search on Google just to check that the numbers do marry up with the genuine numbers for this company and that I wasn't being scammed in some way. Eventually got through and spoke to a chap who pointed out that the claimants, this is the other person that I've supposedly run into, had now instructed a solicitor to take up this case for them. The solicitor had done a little bit of digging, obviously worked out that my registration number was the registration number at the scene. They'd done obviously some sort of DVLA check to get the make and model of the bike, a classic 500. And they were quite literally on the cusp of paying out because, I'd not been in touch, I'd not reported the accident. Because obviously you don't report an accident if you haven't been involved in an accident. Now, he asked me where I was on that day. Off the top of my head, I couldn't remember. It was almost 2 months earlier, but I assumed I'd probably spent most of the day at home because it was an editing day. Now, I did a quick sort of Google search for the location. I mean, there were scant details. There were no details of the vehicle that I'd hit, colour, or the amount of damage that had been caused to it. Nothing, just an approximate location, which turned out to be in Wales, which is about 250 miles away from where I live. So as near as damn it would be about a 500-mile trip, providing I went straight there, had the accident, and then came straight home again. Obviously, I made it very clear that my bike wasn't involved in an accident, neither had I. It turns out the rider had given a name, which wasn't my name. I couldn't obviously at that time account for my exact movements that day, but I did point out that I've not actually been to Wales for about 50 years since I was a kid on holiday, and I'd never been back because I didn't really like Wales. It's full of Welsh people. Now, when you're talking to somebody and you get the feeling they don't really believe what you're telling them, that's the feeling I got. So it's probably getting on for about 50 years since I was last there. Now, the rider of the bike gave a name, but it wasn't my name. I won't give the name, obviously. And I was asked if I knew this person, which I don't. And the conversation started to lean towards the possibility that I'd lent my mule to somebody. Well, nobody rides my bikes except me, and I certainly hadn't lent it to this particular individual. And, that's putting aside the fact that the bike wouldn't currently have been MOT'd at that point, although it was taxed. And in any event, I'm the only person insured to ride my bike, so if I'd lent it to someone, it would be up to them to get their own insurance, so it wouldn't involve my insurance anyway. The whole thing just seemed really odd and very worrying. Now, I was asked if I'd be willing to submit my motorcycle, the MULE, for examination by an engineer to establish whether it had been involved in an accident. Obviously, I've got nothing to hide, so I said yes. And I was given several scenarios as to what might have happened. The driver of the other vehicle had written the number down wrong, in which case it wasn't my vehicle and it's a case of mistaken identity. Or the rider of the vehicle had written the registration number down and given it to them, and perhaps they'd had trouble deciphering handwriting or whatever, in which case it was a case of mistaken identity. Or someone's cloned my registration plate for that bike. Now, I know that registration plate cloning does happen. I didn't realise to what extent it's going on, nowadays. Apparently, it's reached epidemic proportions. It's reached a scale that's never been seen before. Now, I've never really taken any steps on this channel to hide registration numbers of the various vehicles, and I am aware that there's some really weird people out there, because I often get comments in the comment section saying, oh, that bike's not MOT'd and its tax has expired. They're taking your number and they're going and doing DVLA checks. At really odd people. Now, I suppose in hindsight, running this channel does run a higher risk of having a number plate cloned, but at the end of the day, a number plate is in public view all the time. That's the whole point of a number plate. It's there to give everybody and anybody, whether it be law enforcement or a member of the public, the ability to identify a vehicle. It's one of those things, it's on show to absolutely everybody when you're out and about. So it could have just been a matter of, somebody's seen me riding the bike in the Yorkshire Dales or, in my locality, and they thought, oh, I've got a bike that colour. I'll have that number and I'll put it on my bike. Now, you see, the thing is, there seems to be sort of two categories of people that do this. In both cases, obviously, the lawbreakers. Now, in one case, it's people who habitually break road traffic laws. They might want to drive into low traffic neighbourhoods or congestion zones, those sorts of areas where they don't want to pick up a fine. So if they've got someone else's number plate on the back of the bike, it's someone else that gets the fine through the door. There might be people that habitually speed wherever I go, and for the same reasons. They put someone else's number plate on the bike, so somebody else gets the speeding tickets and eventually gets banned rather than them. But I think in a lot of cases, a lot of it is possibly down to just the cost of living in this country and the amount of money that it actually takes to keep a bike on the road nowadays. If you can be reasonably certain that the person whose number plate you're stealing keeps on top of their insurance, the tax and their MOT, it means you don't have to pay for them, and you can ride around possibly for years, providing you keep your nose clean, without having to pay a penny for those various charges that we all have to pay to keep our vehicles on the road. And obviously it's not just motorcycles that do this for cars as well. Now, one of the reasons that this situation is now reaching epidemic proportions, apparently, is internet sales. You see, any sort of business that makes up number plates and sells them, there's certain rules that they have to adhere to. They've got to get the name and address of the person buying the registration plate when they make one up for them. They've also got to prove that they have the right to use that registration number. So you would have to produce your registration documents to them for them to satisfy that you're not just getting a spurious plate made up. But like everything else with the internet nowadays, it's full of rogue traders who are quite happily to make up number plates and send them to anybody without requiring any proof. The DVLA is sort of doing regular checks on internet sales, but apparently it's like playing whack-a-mole. For every one that they put out of business, 3 more pop up. So year on year, it's becoming more of a problem. Now, I don't know for certain that my plate has been cloned, and from what I can gather, I'll probably never find out. But at the moment, I'm running the risk of losing my no claims bonus if I'm unable to prove that it wasn't me on that day and it wasn't my bike. I'm also looking at possibly having difficulties getting insurance in the future because, you know, if they believe it was me, I've failed to fulfill my responsibilities under the contract for the insurance. I've failed to notify them of an accident. Or at least, you know, that's the line that they could take. And the tragic thing about this situation is you're considered guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. You know, the onus is totally on me to prove that it was not me or my bike or both of us that were at the scene of that accident that day. Now, it's inconvenient, actually. It's one of the reasons I haven't been able to do the filming today, is because, you know, I've got nothing to hide, so I agreed to have my bike examined by an engineer to establish whether or not it's been involved in an accident. So today I'm sitting here editing this video instead of being out filming the video for the bear, because the engineer is coming from like 200 miles away, and you know, today was the only day that he was available to be in this area, and you've got to show willing with these sort of things. Now, as I've said, it's not 100% certain yet that my plate has been cloned. It could just be a case of mistaken identity through someone not writing down or reading a registration number properly. But it does seem to me that it's all a little bit one-sided. I'm allowed to have virtually no information from my accuser. I don't know what vehicle I'm supposed to have hit, what colour it was, what the nature of the damage to the other vehicle was. It seems to me that they're keeping a lot of information sort of secret to themselves while they see how this pans out. You know, it sort of feels like they've made a mistake by not getting all the details of the driver, because obviously your requirement in law, if you're involved in an accident with another vehicle, is you're supposed to supply your name, your address, other contact details like a telephone number, as well as the registration of your vehicle. It would appear that this other driver never got the address. That would have sorted this out very quickly. So I'm sort of getting the impression that the other driver doesn't really care whether it was me or my vehicle that was involved in this accident. They just want someone else to pay for it, even though they haven't fulfilled their responsibilities under the road traffic regulations when you're involved in an accident. If it is just a case of someone writing or reading the registration number wrongly, if they'd had the name and the address of the driver, they would have been able to sort it out fairly quickly. This matter would have been finished weeks ago. But it would appear they haven't written the address down. Having said that, like I say, the details of the whole incident are very sketchy. They haven't even supplied my insurance company with the approximate time that the accident supposedly took place. It's just within a 24-hour period, that's all we know. So you can appreciate how infuriating it is for me that I'm having to jump through flaming hoops to prove my innocence when the other party seemingly haven't fulfilled their obligations. So the first bit of advice I would give to anybody, if you're involved in an accident, you know, whether someone runs into the back of you or you run into the back of them, make sure that you get their name, their address, and if possible the telephone number, as well as the make, colour and registration number of the other vehicle. You should always carry a pen with you. We all have mobile phones now, so it's easy to snap a quick picture of the offending vehicle in order to be certain of what you're actually dealing with. And of course, if possible, you should also exchange insurance details, even if it's just the name of the insurance company. And do what you reasonably can to ensure the details that you're given are correct. I mean, there's ways and means of doing that. I'll leave that up to you. But it appears that my accuser has left the scene with nothing more than a registration number, whether it's the correct one or not, we don't know, and a name. That's it. Now, there's a few things that I've learned over the last couple of weeks, things to be aware of if you believe that your registration number for your vehicle, whether it be a car or a bike, has been cloned. First of all, you can report it to the DVLA. Now, they, in my case, have declined to put a note on my file, or my bike's file, that there's possibly a situation where it's been cloned, because there's still that element of doubt there that it might just be mistaken identity through someone not recording the registration number correctly. But I think it's something that you should do straight away, is report it to the DVLA. That way, if there's any speeding fines or parking tickets or anything like that come up in the future, they've got a file already stating that there's a possibility your number has been cloned. As I say, in my case, they declined to do it, but I am going to try again. It might just be the person I was speaking to didn't want to be bothered. But if you're successful in getting them to put a note on the file for your vehicle, it potentially is going to save you a lot of hassle. Now, the other thing you can do, and I didn't know about this, it's been a voyage of discovery, is Google Maps. Make sure that you've got the Google Maps app loaded onto your phone and that it's activated and all the necessary permissions are there for it to record your movements. Now, the Google Maps app records your movements for up to 3 months, so it'll go up to 3 months back in your history, or your travels. And although I said to them initially I didn't have a clue what I'd done on that day, when it was shown to me how to do it and I went into my history, it told me every single movement that I'd made during the course of that day. What time I left the house to walk the dog, how far I walked, how long I was out, what time I returned home, where I went from there, because I went to shops in one of the local villages and I was gone for about an hour, at what time I returned home, how many total miles I'd driven, how long I was then at home before leaving the house again, before walking the dog. It records absolutely everything. If you're an honest person, there's no reason why you shouldn't have that record there. It can help you out in circumstances like this, and you do have the facility of deleting individual days if for some reason you don't want them to be on record. It doesn't provide definitive proof, especially if your insurance company wants to be awkward. But it's, a string to your bow, if you like. It's something that helps sort of create a picture that you were nowhere near the scene on the day. On the day I was 250 miles away all day. I can prove that, although they require more from me. Now, if they want to examine your vehicle, in the case of it being an accident, be upfront and be as accommodating as you possibly can and allow them to do that. Do everything you can to facilitate it and make it easy for them. Now, the engineer actually has just been, while I've been making this video, apparently it goes to 5 of these a week. It's absolutely rife. Now, what he's done is he's taken all sorts of measurements of my bike, he's taken photographs of it, it's photographed all its distinguishing features like accessories and that have been fitted that will set it apart from another model that doesn't have the same accessories fitted. He's also taken a photograph of the mileage, which might come in handy in my case. Now, the accident, as I say, it was about 250 miles away, so even if I'd driven straight there to the scene of the accident, been involved in the accident and then driven all the way back, it's a total of just under 500 miles. Now, where this might help me, because I don't remember using the bike much in 2023, my last MOT was March, April time 2023, and obviously they record the mileage, and your insurance company can apply to the DVLC to get the mileage for your vehicle at its last MOT, which in my case was 2 years ago, and I don't think I've covered anywhere near 500 miles during that time. So that again will help to mitigate the fact that, you know, in the last 2 years the bike hasn't travelled far enough for it to have even got to the scene and back. So ultimately that might be quite useful in my case. Now, it did examine the vehicle thoroughly to ascertain whether A, there was any damage, and B, whether there was any sign of recent repairs. It got a clean bill of health on both of those sort of lines of investigation, and as far as he was concerned, it didn't look to him like it had been involved in any accident in the last few years. But as he pointed out, he just collects all the information and evidence, and then a second engineer has to evaluate that proof and evidence and make a decision as to whether or not there was a possibility my bike was involved in that accident, which is a little bit worrying, if I'm honest, because it does leave me in a position where, through no fault of my own, I could end up losing my no claims bonus and possibly have difficulty getting insurance in the future, which is going to make life hard for me. Now, the other thing that you can do, of course, if you suspect that your plate has been cloned, is to report it to your local police station. There's not necessarily much they can do, but it will create a record that you've raised concerns about it historically if you have any problems in the future. Who knows, they might even investigate it and put a note on the police national computer, so if the guy's stopped that, they'll know what's going on. No, hang on a minute, that's just silly. That would be doing police work. They're not going to do that, are they? Actually, I am surprised that the police haven't been in touch with me. I mean, that was one of my suspicions for this being some sort of elaborate scam in the first place. If you run into the back of another vehicle, it's a due care and attention, and I would have thought that the other party would have reported it to the police, but for whatever reason, and again, this makes me suspicious about the other party, they haven't done that. Now, those are the little bits and pieces of information that I've sort of gleaned from this experience so far. I don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination. I've been told it will be several weeks before I get any response from the insurance company as to whether they just close the case and deny any responsibility or not. So it's going to be hanging over my head for a little while. If anyone else has got any suggestions, other lines that I could go down to help prove that none of this has got anything to do with me, I would be most grateful. If you're the driver or rider that was involved in that accident that's been scratching your head for the last 2 months wondering why no one's been in touch with you, please step forward and sort it out. I would really appreciate that. I think the main thing is, you know, if you're involved in an accident, make sure you get as much information about the other party as you possibly can. You know, even take a secret photograph of them with your phone, take photographs of the car. Try and ensure that you've got the maximum correct information from them before leaving the scene. It can save you a lot of hassle in the long run. I have a feeling that, you know, the other party have found themselves in a jam because they've not done what they should have done, and they're just pointing fingers at anybody now so that someone else, insurance, will pay for the damage to the car, which in this case is me. Anyway, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me ramble on in this video. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. You can help me out in other ways via my Patreon page, PayPal donations, or by using the super thanks button down below. Not essential, but it is appreciated. I will of course be back next week, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.